let's talk about the skills and the characteristics and capabilities that data leaders of the future need. So if you look at the top 10 trends in the industry, number one is data governance. And that's really driven by AI privacy, data protection, data observability, that kind of thing. So what does that mean for data leadership in the future? Because, we're not legal people, we're not lawyers, or maybe some of us are, but, this is something completely out of our area of expertise. So Matt, let's start with you.
Really interesting that you just mentioned the legal aspect, because especially when it comes to peers, it's actually quite nuanced, and to have sort of legal advice, and I think that's something that the big firms benefit from. And I'm not sure I know there's a lot of smaller firms here that might not necessarily have that. And I mean, one of the things I really valued in the bank was having sort of in-house counsel, that you didn't have to be an expert. The lawyers were sitting right next to you and they'd help you through the whole process. But I think the one thing that I've sort of taken away from that over the past 2 years is I think a lot of people see peer as a negative thing. Obviously good in many aspects, that it protects personal information, but a negative thing in terms of maybe limiting use cases and real-time analytics and whatever the case might be. And I mean, the way I think, and this is a mindset shift, and I think the data leader is responsible for this and responsible for communicating this mindset shift to the organization, saying there's actually a huge opportunity for us, and turning challenges into opportunities. I think it's something that's tough, and it's tough to implement, but it's actually an opportunity when you get it right to actually enable many use cases. And obviously I talk from personal kind of experience with data ecosystems, which involves data sharing. If you get peer right, which is obviously important, not only for regulatory things and for the trust in your brand, but for consumers. You want to do right by your consumers, but to really actually benefit them as well, and you can showcase that it's actually a benefit. And leading back to the skills of the data leader, I mean, I think there's an element of innovation there, taking something that on the face of it seems like a regulatory issue, potentially a reporting issue, something we have to comply with, a compliance issue and a legal issue, and saying, hang on, what's the business opportunity here? There's a real opportunity here if we get this right. And we should be getting it right because we're doing right by the business and by our customers and by the regulatory bodies, but there's also a real opportunity to potentially make our customers' lives better. And I think, to do that obviously takes a lot of grit, and you're going to be up against a lot of internal challenges, but an innovative mindset, a way of thinking of things differently and approaching things from a different angle maybe.
Yeah. So I love that very optimistic way of approaching something that could be seen as negative and kind of having that vision of what it can be. So adding on to visionary leadership, what's that going to mean for data leadership in the future?
Well, I think, it's definitely a different world that we're going to be working in, especially I think, this morning, Mark mentioned around AI and the way that it's just going to become part and parcel of our lives. Recently I had an experience around this in my own environment where I'm in gaming, and so responsible gaming is a big thing for us around making sure that we make sure that we don't actually utilize those players and make their lives a living hell in terms of creating addiction. And I think that vision of realizing how AI can potentially help mitigate that and mitigate that risk was something that I had to really get the buy-in from the board around, because this is a lot of investment. It's an investment in terms of collating that data, building the relevant models, creating the insights in terms of the fact that we are actually selling this particular model to other potential buyers in terms of casinos that are utilizing our products. And it wasn't seen as a direct, need out there, because there's so many other things, sales, revenues. These are the things that are, the easy things to sell. But very similar to Matt, I think around how do we build that vision is really, really important. It's the vision of being seen as the leaders in this framework, in being seen as the ethical leaders and the responsible leaders in the industry, and how that ultimately does affect our sales and our revenue. And ultimately that is something that can be a driver for that and a driver for growth. So it really is a change in mindset, but how do we do that? I think it's changing people's mindset of making those links. This morning, I think as well, when we were speaking about data literacy, is how do we make that link for people? How do we allow people to look at it through a critical thinking mindset and realize that there are those links? We're very fortunate in being data because we're able to do that helicopter view and make those links. But how do we actually make the links and sell that to individuals is really important.
Yeah, and that's interesting because it's one thing to be a visionary leader, to have a vision, but to be able to articulate that is a completely different story because you can leave people behind.
Absolutely.
So these elements of good communication, business literacy, etc. So Carina, adding on to that, and specifically around communication, what is it that you think that's going to mean for future data leaders? We can't just be techies.
No, I think if you are only inspiring your own team, if you are only inspiring the other data nerds to do something, then you're losing a big chunk of the power that something can have, right? Because most of us in this room would be excited about the potential that the data has just by default, right? You may be the only person who's excited by data governance by default, but most of us are excited by data by default, right? But our counterparts in sales and marketing, etc., may not be, right? And I think a very simple framework that I saw at a stage basically said if you're truly trying to inspire people, you don't start by telling them what to do and how to do it. You start by telling them why, right? And you start by kind of rooting everybody in the why. And if everybody supports that why, okay, are we all behind the idea that we want to fuel category growth? Are we all behind the idea that we want to improve our consumers' lives? Are we all behind the idea that we want to simplify and streamline the way that we all work? If we're all behind that, then the rest becomes kind of just your map of how you get there. Yeah. But if people are not aligned with you even on the destination and are not excited about the destination, then you can show them a beautiful roadmap and they don't care, right? So I think that's the first really important piece, is that we need to take that step back, understand the why, and sometimes that's going to mean that a tool that looks very cool, some technology that we're kind of very excited about, if we can't figure out a good why that our whole organization is going to be excited about, then maybe it means we need to shelve this thing. Sexy though it is, cool though it is, funky though the technology is, if there isn't a why that actually is kind of a rallying cry for everybody, we need to make our peace with that. So, okay, that's maybe not for now. Actually, let's go after the one that's going to solve for the real problem that everybody cares about.
Yeah, 100%. I love that, because sometimes you have to stand back and do what's right for the company, not for your career as the data leader, So adding on to that, something, Paul, that Carina mentioned there is you've got to inspire everyone in your organization. Now that talks to community. So data leader of the future, do they have to be a community builder?
Absolutely. And I think it goes further than just a community. It's got to do with creating a tribe. Because a community has certain parameters and certain associations with a community. But a tribe is more of a family. You're creating a family framework. Okay. And I think you're going to need, and if you have to use that as an analogy and you post it forward to your data leader skills, it's not just about the skills like we always talk about. And we'll talk about creating and communication. It goes even further than helping them define the why. It is to define and communicate the art of the possible. When you get people excited about something and they can see the possibilities of the future, and they can see the possibilities of even something as totally absurd that they would never think about. The possibilities, the dream, become a dreamer. Create the possibilities, create the dream. When you do that, it's easy to define the why, because when you've got people excited. If you're excited to go to a movie, okay, then getting there, the how and the why is relatively easy because you're excited about the movie. And if you move the focus of when you're doing storytelling, you want to create a community, create something that excites people, the possibilities. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about anything about data. In fact, you don't want it to be about data. You want nothing to be about data. But part of the how and the why is the data. Okay, and that's where you play the role. But you've got to create the possibilities and the dream, and create that excitement and that emotion in people that's broader than just the leadership skill. Because because that's what that emotion drives people. It's not the leadership skills that drive people. Yes, the leadership skills how I do things, but it's not. But that's not the why of a leader. That's not those skills we normally talk every day about. You must be empathetic. You must have communications. You must have, I don't know, all those dimensions that people talk about in leadership. That's the how. That's not why. That's not why we're leaders. Why leaders need to inspire and create possibilities that they can share with people using the how. Okay, so when we talk about skills, we tend to stop talking about skills, and it's a techie thing. I'll tell you now, it's a techie conversation. Techies love to tell you, we can do this. They got all these solutions. Like, okay, that's great. All funky tools and shiny bricks, that's great. But what is it you want to do? So I think the potential of leaders into the future is we must start moving our skills across the dimensions. Then whatever you want to sell in terms of a solution, be it a data dashboard or a MI, that is easy. Then they can buy into data governance.
Yeah.
But selling them governance in an isolated fashion to a solution, to a technology, to we've heard it, a gazillion consultants come past our doors and they tell us the same thing. 15-degree PhD doctors come and tell us the same thing about it, but nothing changes. If you think about it, nothing's changed. It's still the same thing we always did. So for me, it's about future leadership is about being able to create excitement and throwing the seeds of a dream and a vision that the people create themselves, not you. They create, they buy in, it's theirs. You then come back and you say, right, this is how we're going to do it for you. We're going to do X, Y, Z. Great. But you've got to translate that to them. They've got to feel like they're excited, they own it, they want to do it. When you do that, everything behind that.
Yeah.
Easy stuff.
All right. So to summarize, data leaders have to be visionary. They have to be able to see into the future, but they have to be able to sell that future through proper communication, proper articulation, but also building communities, getting people excited. All right. So one of the things that gets me less excited are some of the trends that we see in the industry, and they just pop up. Last year they weren't there, now they're there. Data mesh, for example, trend number 4 in the industry. So as data leaders, and I think it was Carina who talked about, sometimes you just have to stop and think about things. But Matt, what I want to know is, what is the skills that a data leader is going to need in the future to really discern and navigate trends versus, okay, this is actually going to move the dial.
I think that, I read a quote recently that resonated with me quite a lot that said, when it comes to technology, people often overestimate the impact in the short term, but underestimate the impact in the long term. And if you think about AI, I think 5 years ago, it said, what's the impact of AI? No, in a year, we're going to automate all of our processes. Forget about back people in back office, it's all going to be computers. But in 5 years, not so sure. And if you told them, well, actually, over a year, maybe minimal impact, not quite the case of removing back office, but in 5 years' time, everybody's going to have AI on their phones. It's going to be completely democratized, and we're all going to be using ChatGPT, and it's actually going to be the biggest threat to Google. People would have said, no, well, that doesn't sound right. And people focus too much on the short term and not the long term. And I think we don't take into account these real long-term views, and I think that's something, a big thing that's difficult to do. And I think how you solve that is actually what you were talking about earlier, focusing on the why. Why, the why is not going to change. So when I say to my team, cool, that's the why, I get it, but do we need to develop in Power BI or I say, I don't care. I don't care if you develop it in a notepad. That's not important. The how is actually not important. Tools will change all the time. And you can actually develop it in multiple different things. The why is important. The why won't change. The how will change. One day we might have, the data might be on the cloud. The next day, the data might be on the computer. The next day, there won't be a thing called data because it's going to be AI creating data all the time. Who cares? The why is important. The why doesn't change. The why is the vision, the long-term vision. And the how, that changes all the time. And that's maybe a technology thing, what technology you prefer, whatever the case might be. And I think that's, we talk about trends. I think less focused on trends, more focused on the long-term, the why.
Yeah.
And less focused on the how, because the how will change. Today, the best way to do something is X. Tomorrow, it's going to be Y. Next year, it's going to be ChatGPT writing all my code for me. So that will change over time. But the visions that a long-term leader should accurately communicate to the entire, organization, I think those things shouldn't change and should be effective enough that they do get people excited. So if you say our why is we want clean data, somebody in bank and private equity is going to be like, I literally don't care about that at all. If I say, actually, my why is to enable 10 private equity deals that nobody else in the market would have spotted because we've got real-time data that nobody else had, and I see opportunities before they've even, and get multiple returns, many more than you would have had, initially, and help you deploy capital much quicker to help you automate the whole credit process. Okay, now somebody's interested. Now, how you do that is the data, but that's not the why. And I think you need to understand your organization. So it goes back to what you were saying, having the 50% male, 50% female. Every organization is different and has different whys. So your why needs to align to organization. Data is applicable to every different organization, whether it's a bank or a retailer, to a gaming company, to RCS, and it's something that a data leader needs to say, okay, what's my why? How do I align data to my organization and focus on the long-term vision and be less focused on the how?
Yeah. So this situation that Matt just described, Claire, every single technical person in this room had a heart attack. Oh, it's going to change, we're going to decide on this, everything is going to change again. But that's the reality of the world that we are navigating. Exactly. But how do you kind of keep that balance between, okay, here's the vision, here's the why, we're going to, but it's not clear exactly how we're going to get there, and some people have the skills, other people don't have the skills. How do you manage a team with like a combination of like really old, 20-year-old skills, but also the new skills that you want for the future?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting balance because we're sitting in various organizations with various individuals and generations as well that we're sitting with that have various skills. Gen Zs that are coming in. I have some Gen Zs in my team and absolutely amazing. They get on board very quickly. Within 4 to 6 weeks, you've got them up and running. They're doing what they need to do. They're brilliant. And then I have, the millennials. I even have some Gen Xers in my team, and such as myself. And we're all, we're the slow people. We're the ones that are consistently in the Dunning-Kruger effect. Does anybody know the Dunning-Kruger effect? So the Dunning-Kruger effect says that when you get to know something, first of all, and you start to know a little bit of knowledge, you think you know brilliant, you know everything. Think about ChatGPT at the moment. ChatGPT across the world is going through the Dunning-Kruger effect at the moment. ChatGPT, everybody believes, is going to be the solution for everything. Okay? We know a little bit. Everybody's been playing a bit on it. We've got 100 million people that have been playing on it. Everybody's going, Jesus is the solution to everything. We're not going to need journalists. We're not going to need chatbots. We're not going to need encyclopedias. We're not going to need anything. It's going to solve every problem, But in actual fact, when you start digging a little bit deeper, you actually realize, wait a minute. There's a gap here. There's a gap there. It's not 100% right. And you eventually get to a point where you know enough to know that you don't know everything. And I think that is where we also have to, as data leaders, teach the organization and be that sort of stabilization effect in terms of when these new things come in, don't let everybody think that it's going to solve everything. How do we manage that? And how do we also manage that by educating people that this is going to happen? The Dunning-Kruger effect is going to happen. And, you're going to think it's going to solve everything because it's sold that way. There's a reason why ChatGPT was selling it that way was because they wanted to get Microsoft to buy them. They were doing a selling technique. But how do we allow ourselves to not do that and realize that it's okay to not know everything? It's okay that we don't truly understand all our tools and technologies as long as we get that why.
Yes.
I just want to add something, sorry, I know I'm messing up your order here. But I just want to add something to that. I do think that's actually everybody's in this room's responsibility is actually to communicate that. Especially like now, ChatGPT, everything's just the solution, right? I think everybody in this room knows enough about AI to know, actually, hang on a second, there's an error here or there. And I showed a couple of people at work, they're like, ChatGPT is amazing. And I said, write an autobiography for Matthew Bernath from ShopriteX. And said, Matthew Bernath is the CEO of ShopriteX and wrote this whole thing. And they said, no, but hang on a second, that's not correct. And I said, yeah, it all comes down to the question. And I said, who is Matthew Bernath from ShopriteX? They actually said, I don't know. But when I said, write a bio, it said, write this whole thing. And then you write, where did you get that information from? I said, I wrote a bio from somebody who works in retail, and I looked at ShopriteX. Because AI actually does make stuff up. and I think everybody in this room knows enough to be able to say, hang on, this is our time. This is actually data leaders' time to shine people in the data world. To say, hang on a second, this is taking the world by storm. Let's show you where this is applicable and where it's not.
So we just said you have to be inspirational, you have to be visionary, but at the same time you have to be the person in the room who says, and hang on a second, maybe we can't just get there just now. You know, you have to have courageous conversations with the people who will actually sign the checks. So would you say courage is also something that data leaders of the future should have? In fact, we probably already have, we should have that. But is that important?
So I think courage is important, and also the ability to impart courage to our teams, to the rest of our organization. And it's not at the expense of having this beautiful vision, right? I think having the beautiful inspirational vision is great. But the reality, which often isn't talked about, is that along the way we will stumble, along the way we will fail, along the way we will learn, right? And very often, in the interests of getting everybody inspired and excited, no one proactively brings that across. So, okay, is everybody excited about this vision? Amazing, let's make it happen. And in everyone's minds, it's a straight path there. And I think whether in the beginning proactively or along the way as we encounter stumbling blocks, one of the big things that we're going to need to do is interrogate honestly whether this stumbling block indicates that we're on the wrong track, or whether this stumbling block is normal and simply indicates that we need to push through and keep going. Right? We need to have the courage to look through that, have that conversation, because if the answer is, we still have this vision, but you know what, actually this is not the right road to get there, the earlier you can admit that, the better. Yeah. But if you are on the right road and you just need to push through, then don't give up, right? And being able to figure out which of those two it is hard. Because if you thought it was going to be a highway, it's not necessarily, right? And I think some things in my career have been easier than I anticipated, and some have been harder than I anticipated. And being able to kind of look back and say, okay, but am I still confident in the why? Yes. Okay. Am I still confident in the how? No. I actually think the how needs to change. Okay, cool. Let's figure that out and have that conversation with the rest of the organization so that people still feel that family and that community, right? Because families and communities are willing to see each other through when stuff is going badly, when we're struggling, when this is going to take twice as long as we thought, right? But if we still have this shared vision and we still believe in it, okay, then let's go. So I think, it's not like courage has never been important and all of a sudden it's important now. It's not like being inspirational and the ability to communicate is suddenly important, but I think going forward it's going to be even more so.
Yeah, 100%. So there's another side to that, Paul. So sometimes we're the people who's not saying stop, we're the people who say let's start it. So sometimes, we are the ones who lead with a cloud strategy, yes, or with whatever. So then the conversation is different. It's still difficult. But now it's not you saying, okay, hang on, just, put your foot on the brake. You can't do that. You're the one who says, take your foot off the brake. And those are also difficult conversations. Sure. And they're going to become even more difficult.
Yeah.
So
and I think part of that leader thing I think you mentioned as well is our job is not only just to build and create the vision and get everybody excited, but sometimes our job is to create the anchor and bring everybody down.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see data leaders must be a little bit contrarian in their views. Okay, and if you know me for many years, anything that comes across my desk, the first thing I do is look at the bad things. I don't look at the good things, I look at the bad things. If I accept the good and the bad things, if I understand the bad things about what's coming down the line, if I accept them and I accept the risk, then I will decide if I want to use the benefit. But if you're only looking at the positive, what typically happens is you never look at the negative. Okay, because you're all excited. ChatGPT is an example. You go to LinkedIn, you go to post. I count 40 things about JJ, all positive. How to make $1,000 in 15 minutes, how to do this, how to do that. Where's the negative side to this, guys? Can we have a conversation, please? Before everybody goes out and sells cheese and cake to the Christmas elves, has anybody stopped to think, how's it going to impact me? How's it going to impact my business? Great product, got to implement ChatGPT in my organization. Right. So what's it going to do? Well, we can do this, and it's going to automate help desk, and all these things. Okay, that's great. That's a valid business position. So what are the negative effects of that? Because the negative effects are the things that are going to destroy things, not the positive things. And if you don't understand the risk of technology in deploying it in a community, in an organization, the positives are irrelevant.
Yeah.
Positives are irrelevant.
And what it sounds like to me, as a data leader of the future, you're going to have to be optimistic, pessimistic, realistic, data visionary, but also the anchor. I just don't think we get paid enough.
And have cake and cheese.
I'm with you on that.
So there you have it. You're going to have to be everything.